Good evening. The Design Review Board public meeting of January 27th, 2022 is called to order. Due to the COVID-19 novel coronavirus and the health recommendations from the Los Angeles County Health Department, this Design Review Board meeting is being conducted virtually with no members of the public present. The public is encouraged to watch and participate from the safety of their homes. The Design Review Board meeting is being broadcast live on Glendale TV, viewable on Spectrum Cable Channel 6, and AT&T UVerse Channel 99. Meetings are also streamed live in high definition on the city's webpage at www.glendaleca.gov/live, LIVE, on youtube.com/myglendale, and on Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire devices using a free app called ScreenWeave and choosing Glendale TV from the menu. Meetings are also archived on the city's website for viewing anytime at glendaleca.gov/agendas. For public comments and questions during this meeting, please call 818-937-8100. City staff will be submitting the questions and comments in real time to the appropriate person. Current Design Review Board agendas and staff reports are also available by visiting our website at www.glendaleca.gov. Records of decisions for all projects will be posted online on the Planning Division's website. Please note that any appeal of a case heard today must be filed within 15 calendar days of the design review decision date. The appeal application is also available online. In terms of a roll call, Board Member Minas is absent. Board Member Chagayan?
Here.
Board Member Welch?
Here.
And Chair Simonian?
Present.
Report regarding posting of the agenda. The agenda for the January 27th, 2022 regular meeting of the Glendale Design Review Board was posted on the city's website on January 20th, 2022, and on the bulletin board outside City Hall on January 24th, 2022. Next up, approval of Design Review Board minutes from December 9th, 2021. Those were actually posted online, though there appears to have been a notice that they would be continued to the next case. So it is up to the board to decide whether or not you wish to hear these meeting minutes. Board Member Chagayan was absent. Board Member, well, at the time, Chair Welch and Board Member Simonian were present. So
I'll move to adopt the minutes.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
Thank you. And I would imagine that that would be a yes to approve the minutes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next up, and just to let the public and the board know that the meeting minutes from January the 13th were not ready at this time or during the time that the the agenda was posted, and so those meeting minutes from January 13th will be presented to at the next hearing, which would be February the 10th. So coming up. Next item on the agenda, oral communication, and these are items limited to topics limited, not a part of this agenda. I do not see any callers for oral communication. So next up would be board and commission member comments. Are there any comments from the board?
I don't believe so.
Okay. We have no items under old business. We have 2 items under new business. One is a case at 3309 Mills Avenue, and case planner Eileen Babakani will be presenting that. And the next case on the agenda would be a design review for a new single-family house at 1226 Vista Court, and that was a project that was remanded back from the city council on appeal. So with that, I'd either like to turn it over to Chair Welch or to Ms. Babakani to give the presentation.
Thank you.
Chair Simonian, I think you meant.
Forgive me. Yes, Chair Simonian, I apologize.
Thank you, Ms. Zematitis. Yes, we'll continue on. We'll move on to the first case, 3309 Mills Avenue, which is PDR 2115380. And Ms. Babakani, please lead us off and start us off. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Simonian. I'm going to share my PowerPoint presentation with you and go over the project. I'm hoping that you're able to see the screen with PowerPoint presentation.
We see it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. So this is the case.
What we're seeing is the design review board, 3309 Mills Avenue, kind of blank.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah, this is, yeah. Here you go. The case before you is a design review application with case number PDR 2115380 for a proposed development located at 3309 Mills Avenue. The project site is a 7,300 square foot interior lot with frontage on Mills Avenue. The lot has a regular rectangular shape, similar to majority of properties in the neighborhood. The lot is developed with an existing 1,039 square foot one-story house and attached carport built in 1938. The existing house will be remodeled and will be converted to an approximately 900 square foot accessory dwelling unit or ADU. The existing house, which basically is going to be the future ADU, is located towards the rear of this lot. And the design of this ADU is not within DRB purview for this project. The existing house appears to be altered and doesn't appear to be eligible for listing in the Glendale Register of Historic Resources. It's therefore not considered a historic resource under CEQA. The project is to construct a new 1,570 square foot one-story single-family residence and an attached two-car garage at the front of the towards the front of the lot, at the front of the existing house, which is the future ADU. The property is located in the R1 floor area ratio District 2 zone. And the lot, the subject lot slopes gradually, as you can see in this section drawing, up front along the length of the lot from the front to the rear. And in terms of the site planning of this project, the site planning is appropriate to the site and neighboring properties because it follows the neighborhood context. It provides required minimum 25-foot street front setback and required minimum 6-foot interior or side setbacks, again, appropriate to the neighboring context. The house will have a minimum of 6-foot distance to the proposed ADU at the rear, meeting the zoning code requirement. The location of the driveway is not going to be changed. The new driveway will have decorative pavers, and the location of the new attached two-car garage is also consistent with the neighborhood context and site planning of the proposed house. And the project will receive some new low water usage plans, which will complement the overall design. In terms of the mass and scale of this project, staff believes the overall proportions of the new one-story house and the articulation of the facades are appropriate to the site, relate to the context of the neighborhoods of 1- and 2-story homes, and reinforce the overall architectural concept. The overall height of the proposed one-story house will be 15 feet and 4 inches, which is under the 28-foot height limit in this zone. The proposed roof is going to be a combination of hipped and gable roof with a roof pitch of 5 feet in 12, which again reinforces the proposed design concept and is appropriate to the neighborhood. Here on this slide, you can see the front elevation of the new home. Here I put the side elevation of the new house, which is the northwest elevation. And this slide, you can see the other side, which is southeast elevation of this new house. And this is the rear elevation. In terms of the design and detail, staff believes that the proposed architectural details and colors are consistent and reinforce the proposed design concept, which is appropriate to the neighborhood context of various architectural styles. The front entry porch is well integrated into the overall design. The new windows are going to be fiberglass windows with dark color. There will be recess in the wall with seals and wood surrounds and represent the proposed architectural style with an appropriate combination of fixed and casement windows. The location of gutters and downspout and trash storage and air conditioning unit are appropriate and out of public view. On this slide, you can see the detail provided by the applicant for the roof eave and windows. Here we have the specification of the exterior material for this new house. Here you can see the window, front entry door, light fixture and railing, stone veneer and pavers for the driveway. And in the conclusion, staff recommends the approval of this design review case with 3 conditions. First condition is basically for the landscape plan. The plans has been provided and they're showing new plans with low water usage. However, a condition of approval is added for providing landscape drawing in compliance with the state model water efficient landscape ordinance prepared and certified by landscape architect. Condition number 2 is for the boundary walls and or any gates, because the drawing do not clearly identify new or existing boundary walls, any gate or any other walls. A condition of approval is added to provide details and drawing of any existing and new perimeter walls and or gates in appropriate location and style, color, and material with respect to the site planning of the subject project and neighboring properties. For condition number 3, the proposed plans show the location and details of the light fixture. However, staff believes we should have a condition for reducing the number of proposed light fixture on the side facade, which is the southeast facade, to avoid over illumination. And this concludes my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Babakani. Board members, do we have any questions for staff? No? I had one question. There were two conflicting pieces of information. You mentioned fiberglass windows in the packet, in the elevations. I believe there's a call out that said vinyl windows, but then the cut sheet mentioned fiberglass. Is everything going to be, all the sliders and windows going to be fiberglass?
Chair Simone, as far as I remember, and I can check the drawing again, I believe the vinyl windows were proposed for the ADU, not for the new house.
I see.
And the existing house has already vinyl windows, and I think there are going to be some window replacement with vinyl material only for the ADU at the rear.
Understood. Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, the new house will receive fiberglass windows. No problem.
Great, thank you. So with that, I'll like to open the public portion and go to the applicant. Who will be representing the applicant? Is it Mr. Najibi?
You're muted, Mr. Nagibi, if you don't mind.
Mr. Nagibi, for your own safety, we ask that you pull over to give your presentation rather than drive in the car.
Sure. Give me a sec. I'm on the road, so sorry, I was stuck in the traffic. Can you hear me now?
Yes, why don't we we'll wait for you to park safely.
Yeah, I just pulled over. I'm sorry. Sorry for the hard time. Yes, I'm Aiden Nagibi, designer of the project 3309 Mills Avenue. And I think Ms. Babakani covered the project pretty well. And if you have any question, I'm available.
Okay. By the way, this may have been the first time an applicant actually presented while driving. So I'm glad you were able to pull over safely.
I'm sorry.
Board members, do we have any questions for the applicant? Board member Walsh.
Yeah, I had a question about some of the colors. The color board seems to show the fascia boards in a light gray, but the renderings show a darker gray. Darker than for the stucco and the wood siding. So I'd like clarification on what is the intention of the colors of the fascia board.
To give some contrast separation between the roof and the main facade color. So we try to have a darker color to distinguish those two to get from each other.
So the colors on the rendering, the darker color, is what the goal is.
Is what the goal is. That's correct.
Okay. Because it does the little materials cutouts there do not look like they're the same. And then I wanted to ask a quick question. I understand the plan here with the ADU. My concern about it is, and I know the ADU is kind of outside of the scope of our project, but the main window of that, what will be the ADU, is this sort of curved glass, very large sized window that will be looking into a blank wall, very close, just a few feet away. And did you put any thought into trying to do something that would make it a little bit more of an appealing view, like a trellis, living wall, or something like that, to try and make it a little bit more appealing for that living room window for the ADU?
We actually try to stay in an existing pattern of the existing building. We didn't want to make too many changes.
Mm-hmm.
And since it's in the rear of the property and it's not visible, and it's going to be for rental purposes, so try to skip the low cost or financial issues for the clients that he was keep asking. So that was the purpose. If you have any comments, we are open to, and we can make it better.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure.
Just want to remind the board that if you do have comments on any ADU, this one or any others, we don't have any authority as a design review entity I don't see any problem if you raise a question and say, oh, did you think about this the way you did, Mr. Welsh? But we can't add any conditions or anything like that.
Thank you, Mr. Platt. Are there any more questions for the applicant or staff? So with that, we'll,
Board Member Chagayan's raising her hand.
oh, I should reshuffle my layout. I apologize. Ms. Chagayan, go ahead.
Sorry, yes, just to, I guess, piggyback on Mr. Welch's question and to further discuss what Mr. Platt said, even if the condition is on the house, are we, I mean, for reasons of the proximity to the ADU, is that not something in our purview? Or is that the...
I think we should avoid it, but
Okay.
Leo seems to agree, so.
Okay. So I do have a question for the applicant, and just from a site planning perspective, I mean, the house is not huge by any means, but was, and typically we don't see single story being the first option, but was a two-story option explored at all in order to give a little bit more backyard space or space in general between the two structures, or not?
It was considered, yes. First, at the beginning, it was considered, but again, I think for the construction cost, again, the financial hardship they had, so they decided to go with one story. So on the other hand, I understand the adjacent fabric has some two-story houses, but as designers and architects, we always encourage them to stay on lower one story to be, you know, consistent with the neighborhood.
Thank you.
Sure.
Do we have any more questions for the applicant? I don't see any raised hands. So Ms. Zimataitis, do we have any callers for this project?
Yes, we do. We have one caller, Mike Ross. Mike Ross, you're live on the air with the Design Review Board.
Hello, do you hear me, guys?
We do,
Yes,
sir.
I hear you. You're live on the air with the Design Review Board.
Okay, I'm the owner of the neighbor property at 315 Mills Avenue. So I guess I will be affected the most by this construction. I have few questions about the project. The first one, since it's, as I understand, it's going to be like mostly rental income property, the street has basically no free parking available. I mean, it's easy to create additional perpendicular parking for the ADU, so it will be 4-car will fit. But it's like it's minor problem. Second problem, that house will be located right in, next to my house, current one. My house, I believe the current setback is about 4 feet or so from the property line, because it was built like in 40s and remodeled in 80s. My current layout of the house, all my bedrooms basically facing entertaining area of the new house. So basically, there are sliding doors, and the living room will be facing our bedroom windows. And I have the small kid and my family also. Another problem, that old house we have, it was built like in the last century, where there's no sound insulation of any kind. So basically, all noise coming from this house will be coming right on our bedrooms. And if basically like owners considered talking with us before or know or layout of our house and basically flip their proposed plan, so all bedrooms will be on their bedrooms will be same side as our bedrooms, and their living rooms in the kitchen with the other side will be way more convenient for everybody.
Thank you, sir. We'll take that into consideration. Are there any more callers?
There are no other callers.
Right. Ms. Zimataitis, that individual that just called, are they the home I guess, on the dining room side of the new proposed home. Is that right?
From my understanding, yes.
Um, and were there any other callers? I'm sorry, I know I asked, but I forget the answer.
No, there are no other callers.
And so, Ms. Najibi, you have an opportunity for rebuttal if you so choose. Any thoughts in conclusion?
Well, there are some restriction with the existing driveway. We're trying to not mess too much with the public works and the changing the direction of uh, the garage apron, the driveway apron. So the location of the garage is on that side, and architecturally the circulations and also the light study we did. So we decided to have the bedrooms kind of in the back and on the side of that side of the property. Um, if that's a big issue, we try to stay in the ordinance, zoning in the ordinance, setbacks, privacies, and everything. So if it's a real issue, we can work on it. But it's kind of I have to go through it. I can't tell right now.
And is the intent of that patio right off of the dining area? Have you integrate that as the kind of main seating, outdoor seating area for this house because everything's so crammed together? Or what's the purpose of that patio?
Well, that's architecturally we try to have some subtracted from the side and then add-ons to give some character to the architectural building, and not really for the seating purposes. They're just they're taking the trash probably out from there, so they want to smoke a cigarette probably. You know what I mean? Just standing for a couple of minutes, 5 minutes there. So not for a big party, obviously, in 6-7 feet setback, right?
Right. So where would the, I guess, private open space, outdoor space be for this new addition?
It's on the rear of the property, mostly towards the ADU on the side, which should be considered as, if I'm not mistaken, northwest.
I see. And I'm asking because, there's this walkway and then you have your trash cans, right? And
Right.
then it turns into a grass area. There's some sort of a structure that's proposed in the middle. I think that's an existing fence or something like that.
That's correct.
Which
Which is going to be adjustable later on, so for the open space.
And so I think, all right, well, is there a diagram in here that depicts kind of the private spaces for both? Which sheet should we be looking at?
See the proposed. I think we didn't include the ADU, the total floor plan of both, but on the proposed site plan, yeah, probably in the more between two buildings mostly. Right next to the trash cans are gonna be like kind of an open space for seating purposes, and the owner is gonna live there. So
Wouldn't it make sense to dedicate one of either the north or south side, maybe the north side of the ADU as kind of space for the home, and then maybe the south side of the ADU as more of a space for the ADU?
yes, we spoke about that. So that's why I mentioned at the beginning that fence is gonna be adjustable. So we may take a little bit more from side of the ADU, the northwest portion, and give it to the main building, because the ADU, the proportion of the square footage of both buildings, probably, yes, you're right, it doesn't make sense. We probably can adjust that.
Okay. All right. Do we have any more questions for the applicant? No. So with that, we'll go ahead and close the public portion. Ms. Chigayan, do you mind starting us off?
Sure. So overall, like I said earlier when I was asking the question, I mean, we don't get to see single story too often. I think this is a, you know, simple design. It's not too massive, and it's not too large in mass or scale. It's a good mix of materials, so I appreciate mixing up the materials to give it some character. I do agree with staff's report on conditions, although for condition number 3 for the lighting, I also believe the rear elevation is a little excessive with the lights, especially particularly with how close it is to the ADU behind it. And although we can't, like it was stated, comment on what Mr. Welch was suggesting, I think it would be nice to take that into consideration. If you could, maybe some planting would be nice. But the lighting, I think, is also too much on the rear, especially when that large living room window is so close to the proposed house. I think that was the extent of my comments. I think I'm in support of the project with the proposed conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Board Member Walsh?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I largely agree. I think the moderation of the design is appropriate to the neighborhood. I don't think that there's any issue with it fitting into the neighborhood context. And you know, the materials used are appropriate. And I think that's the only real thing that I would you know, obviously, except for any discussion about ADU, which we can't say, would be the color scheme. I do want to you know, affirm that the renderings, you know, I think are most appropriate, and that the darker fascia boards, I think, is correct application of color and contrast, as opposed to that lighter color that it appeared on the materials board. So I would definitely like to make sure that that is the appropriate, the approved color scheme. The only other thing is, again, a lot of gray. You know, I recognize that we have the stone veneer, and I think that that is appropriate. I'm just, you know, there's, you know, the design guidelines that specify that we should be focusing on using more natural colors, earth tones, and gray on gray is, you know, a little cold. I think you can do grays, but, you know, have them a little bit more in the earth tone range as opposed to the colder grays that I'm seeing here. So it's always hard to tell since we're not seeing actual cut sheets and details, but, you know, we're relying on the rendering of our computer monitors. But again, I think that that's something that's a little bit warmer in hue would be more appropriate color-wise. But otherwise, I'm fine with it. I think that's the, you know, the detailing of how you deal with, you know, a second unit on a property like this. You know, I think maybe a little bit more thinking could go into like the location of the AC unit. It seems to be like it's right on the pathway to the ADU. So I don't know if that's something we can make reference to, but it seems like it's like just sort of stuck there by the pathway. But you know, again, I'll leave that aside since I can't reference ADU. So I guess that's about it. So thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Walsh. You know, I'll just start off by indicating that I'm in support of the project. And I'm not going to reiterate what has already been said by the other board members, but I'd like to concentrate on sheet L1, Landscape 1, which is page 15 of the PDF. My comments are going to be more site planning oriented because I think that's really where we should focus in on, or I'd like to focus in on at the moment. Leaving the design of the ADU aside and the location of the ADU aside, I think the orientation and location of the front house is correct. I do believe, though, it is necessary and important where we itemize outdoor spaces and how they should be used, the common open area, say. Um, and so it makes sense for the southern portion of the ADU to be utilized as some sort of a private space for the ADU because their walkway is really on the south side where you're coming in from the driveway. And it also makes sense, as Board Member Welsh brought up, for there to be much lusher, higher landscaping between the two dwelling units, the ADU and the new. And it also makes sense for the northern portion of the ADU, that setback, to be kind of integrated and site planning to the front house. There's also a very usable flat area in the back, only a few steps up. Looking at the survey, the spot elevations are flat, and that could also be used as outdoor space. And so I would relocate the trash maybe more towards the front of the house, and then create a secondary separate trash area for the ADU on the south, and really create a buffer between the two via landscaping to make it usable. In regards to the dining room, I do think that that patio could better be served as a slider window versus a sliding door. Again, the idea is to connect the house to the outdoor space, and it doesn't really make sense for the connection of the house to go through the side yard out of this patio to the rear. And so site planning wise, I think that's where this house kind of falls short because, there is no connectivity from the rear of the house to the backyard. The only way you can access this backyard is from a slider next to the dining room table, which doesn't really make sense. So without really going into kind of the interior planning of this, I think it would make sense to kind of have a corridor that leads somehow to the backyard. And so they're not going through a side yard that's very narrow. It's going to be a rental, bothering the tenant next door, and really try to utilize a limited space, outdoor space. So those would be my comments. And I think it's an important piece because we're going to have more of these coming forward. And we should concentrate on usability and bifurcation of these these kind of rentals. So those were my thoughts, and I was wondering if there were any additional thoughts from the board members. Well,
yeah, I concur. I think that the thinking about the utilization of the site, definitely does fall within our purview. So, giving some guidance towards creating, working with staff towards creating a cleaner segregation between private open spaces between the units, or maybe we can't say it's between the units, but for the main home, at least, that is within our purview, that there should be clearly delineated private outdoor space called out, and potentially restudied for circulation and access, and creating a greater sense of privacy for it.
we just looking at the floor plan, I mean, just if you just go and create a corridor straight through where the refrigerator is, you'll end up with a smaller walk-in closet, but it almost ends up being a corridor right to the outside, for example. Flip side is you end up right in the middle of that circular window on the ADU side. However, those were where I would have started as an architect. It's kind of site planning, orientation, etc. Okay.
I just wanted to chime in that I agree as well with everything that you both said. The only thing that when I was looking at it, it looks like that area D in the back is sort of, it's 2 feet higher than the finished floor inside the house. So I think you would have to have like a retaining wall or of some kind, or maybe just a little walkway back there. But I agree that I think site planning wise, there was something off with, to me too, when it came to that dining room slider. But your suggestion of making that a window, I think is valid.
Mr. Platt, do you have enough feedback from us, or would you like some clarification?
I think we're good. I could read back to make sure we captured everything. We have a condition to modify staff condition number 3 to include the number of lights at the rear facade, to reduce those to the degree possible to make them functional and not overlight that area. We have, and I think in terms of this ADU thing, you're not allowed to design the ADU. If we're talking about adding additional landscaping as a buffer, I think we're cool there. So we could actually make that a condition rather than a consideration. We have a condition to modify the proposal to include the color palette shall reflect the color shown on the rendering, and to the greatest degree possible, make all of the grays warmer grays rather than cold grays. We have a condition that sounded more like a consideration, but to consider relocating the HVAC condenser so that it wouldn't be directly on a frequently used pedestrian path. And we have, I think I got more specific direction on the landscaping from Chair Simonian in the area between the 2 units to hire lusher kind of landscape palette to create some meaningful visual buffering. We have a condition to clearly segregate the private open spaces for each unit, preferably the north side being the unit for the front house, the south side being the area for the rear unit. We have a condition to relocate the trash enclosure area toward the front of the lot so that we could free up some space to create that private open space. And then we have a condition to remove the sliding door at the dining room and replace that with a window, which could turn into a place where the HVAC condenser could go if that made sense. And then finally, we have a condition to revisit the interior layout to allow for a access to the rear yard at the rear of the house in whatever manner works for the layout. Did you capture everything?
I believe so. Do I have a motion?
I'll move it.
And I'll second.
Okay, this is a roll call. Chair Simonian,
Yes.
Board Member Welch,
Yes.
and Board Member Chikayan.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion passed.
Okay, thank you guys. I will consider all the conditions to the design. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
I'm sure he meant to say implement.
Yes, exactly.
And so off to our next case at 1226 Vista Court. Is staff ready for that presentation?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Wonderful. Proceed. Mr. Baltikyan.
Yes. Good evening, Mr. Chair and Design Review Board members. This case is unique in the sense that it was remanded by the City Council back to the Design Review Board for consideration with specific direction to review certain points, certain conditions from the council, in addition to the Design Review Board's conditions. A brief background, this project is to develop a single-family house, 2 stories, on a lot that was subdivided recently from a larger lot. The Design Review Board reviewed the project relatively recently and approved the project with a number of conditions. The Design Review Board's approval was appealed to the City Council. The City Council heard the case. In the interim, the applicant had supplied some revisions to the plans in an attempt to address the Design Review Board's conditions. The council heard the case. The council didn't make a decision on the case and remanded the review of the case back to the Design Review Board with specific direction to focus on 5 conditions. And one of the conditions is for the Design Review Board to review compliance with all the initially approved Design Review Board conditions from the Design Review Board's initial approval. So we are here before the Design Review Board for another review of the project. I prepared some slides that show the revised plans and the initially reviewed plans and the comparison between the two, with comments as to how the conditions were addressed. Before I get to that, I'd like to mention to the board that we received a number of comments from neighboring property owners and comments from the project applicant regarding rebuttal or commenting on the comments that we received and distributed to the Design Review Board. More specifically, we received comments from Ms. Ingrid Wilcox, the Matosian family, Lori Buntain, Mary Baldwin, Patty Silvershare, and also Mr. Sean Brisky, the project applicant. All the comments were forwarded to the Design Review Board member for consideration. If I may go to the slides, I can walk you over all the points.
Yes, Mr. Balkikian, please.
Let me share the screen. Okay. So the first slide is a reminder that this is a remand by the City Council to the Design Review Board. The project address is 1226 Vista Court. A little location map, aerial view. And these are the new plans. But better than discussing the new plans, I'd like to show you the relationship of the new compared to the previously reviewed project. And I'll get back to these as necessary. Okay. This is the first condition from the City Council. The condition was to address whether the revised plan shows an adequate recess of the 2nd story with respect to the garage level on the lower level. And this is a front-facing elevation. And the concern here was to address the massing, the stacked massing of the second story over the garage. So on the left, we have the new plan. To the right, we have the previously reviewed plan. As we can see here, the second story, I don't know if my pointer is visible.
It is.
It is. So the second story here is recessed compared to the lower level garage. Whereas the previous plans, the two were stacked on top of each other. The recess now is about 3 feet. And in staff's opinion, this is an adequate change in the massing and reduction in the overall mass at the front elevation. Moving on. Regarding the same matter, this is a little perspective of the new design, and this is the previous design here, showing the two-story, second story stacked over the garage level. Continuing further down, the second condition from the City Council was for the applicant to prepare a line of sight drawing. This is to address privacy issues from the second story balcony that's located almost centrally in the new house. So the applicant has prepared a line of sight analysis. In this case, both relate to the new plans. And on the left, we have a view analysis from the lower level. To the right, we have a view analysis from the upper level where the balcony is located. I circled here the location of the balcony. What staff suggested to the applicant at the time was to provide a screen wall on the south side of the balcony to somehow reduce the view from the balcony towards the neighboring property to the south. In staff's opinion, this addresses the issue partially. There were concerns at the design review board meeting also regarding privacy with respect to the property, to the adjacent property to the north. A staff suggestion is that a screen wall also be added on the north side of the balcony to further reduce from the privacy issues related to this balcony. And this is recommended as a staff condition, and we'll get to it towards the end of my presentation. The next plan, Council's condition number 3 was for the applicant to revise the landscape plan and make it more friendly towards the existing oak tree, which is located near the sidewalk. It was pointed out when the project was reviewed by the design review board that at the base of the oak tree, gravel was proposed and ground cover and hedge material, which altogether were not friendly to the oak tree. The applicant has revised the plan, which is on the left now. The applicant has removed the gravel ground cover at the base of the oak tree and replaced it with wood chips. The ground cover and the hedge that were in question were also removed and replaced by other planting materials. This revised plan has been reviewed by the Forestry Division and has been approved as compatible with the oak tree. Moving on, condition from the City Council, which was also a condition by the Design Review Board initially, was to tone down the color palette. To the left, we see the revised color palette. To the right, we see the previous color palette. When Council discussed this, they were not aware that the COVID situation would be ongoing, and they suggested that the Design Review Board see the actual color palette. Given our current situation, what I did is the following. Since it's a little hard to compare photographs of the actual color chips, what I did is I brought the before and the after so that the board and the public can see side by side. On my left, which is this, is the new color proposal. On my right, which is this, the one I'm waving, is the initial proposal that was reviewed and commented on. So in staff's opinion, the revised color palette is significantly lighter and appears to be okay. Moving on, the fifth condition from the City Council was for the design review to consider all the conditions that were adopted during the initial design review board's approval of the project. And I'm going to go through these individually. And let's keep in mind that some of these are redundant and duplicated, and I'll go through them anyway very quickly. The first condition from the design review board, condition 1, was to step the second story above the garage back to break up the massing. We've already discussed this. The second story was moved back about 3 feet, and staff's opinion is that this is acceptable. Condition 2 from the design review board was to lower the parapets on the second story projections at the north and south facades. Now, looking at the building from the front, on the left, we have the new proposal, and we are specifically talking about the parapets that are within the red circles. And to the right, we have the previous plans with higher parapets. The reason for this condition was twofold. One, to preclude these areas from being used as second-story balconies. And second was to provide some massing relief. The parapets have been lowered by approximately a couple of feet, so approximately a 1-foot parapet is left. And in staff's opinion, this significantly reduces the massing, precludes these areas from being used in the future as balconies, and the condition is complied with. Condition 3 from the design review board was to revise the drawings to correct inconsistencies. At the time the plans were presented to the design review board, there were some inconsistencies between the plan view and elevations. There were some windows shown on one but not the other in their proper location or number. These have been fixed and the plans have been corrected and revised. Condition 4 from the design review board was to provide a door schedule for all exterior doors. A door schedule has been provided. I provided an excerpt from the plan. What's specified is wood doors, either entirely wood or wood with glass. And this is in compliance. Condition 5, to revise the drawings to indicate the location of all gutters and downspouts. What I presented here on the left is the new drawings. The gutters and the downspouts are almost not very visible because they are tiny. To the right is again the new plan showing a gutter along the roof edge and the downspout. And there's also a note on the plan that from the lower level, the downspouts would be hidden within walls and not exposed. So we only have gutters and downspouts on the upper level only. Condition 6 from the design review board was to show the location of the mechanical equipment and trash area on the plans. The little plan excerpt on the bottom here shows a location for the trash and mechanical equipment. It's within a niche in the back of the garage, and the location is appropriate. Condition 7 was to revise the color palette to provide a softer, less saturated color palette. From what I've shown, the color palette has been modified, and staff's opinion is that it's better now and it complies. Condition 8 was to revise the landscape plan with materials more friendly to the oak tree. As I discussed earlier, this has been accomplished with a revised landscape plan and changes to the plant materials and ground cover at the base of the oak tree. Condition 9 is to obtain a permit from Public Works Urban Forestry to prune the oak tree. Since this is an ongoing condition which would apply during construction, in the permitting phase, during construction, and subsequently, we left the condition in place. And condition 10 is to specify a decorative finish for the driveway. On the right side here, we see a concrete driveway right here. The revised plan on the left shows gravel bands within the concrete driveway, and this satisfies the requirement for a decorative driveway. Condition 11, this relates to existing fences and block walls that are located either along the sides in the front yard or a little further down. Some of this has been addressed already in the revised plans, but staff's opinion is that this condition should remain so that we can address it during the plan review process if the project moves forward. Condition 12, this relates to the existing CEQA document that applicable to the property. There's a mitigated negative declaration that applies to the property, and the mitigation measures relate to putting in place traffic safety measures during the construction phase and also the ongoing protection and maintenance of the oak tree. Since these would apply during the construction phase and beyond, we think it's appropriate to leave this condition in place. Having said all this, I'd like to come to the new recommended conditions. The first one is to address the privacy issues from the second story balcony. As I said, a screen wall was proposed on the south side of the balcony, and staff thinks a similar screen wall on the north side of the balcony would help alleviate some of the privacy issues, and hence the condition number 1. Condition number 2 is to obtain permits from the Public Works Urban Forestry Division for any pruning of the oak tree. Condition 3 is regarding the fences so that they can be modified to comply. And condition 4 is to keep applying the mitigation measures from the CEQA document on the property. Having said this, I'd like to conclude my presentation and make myself available for questions from the board or anybody else.
Thank you, Mr. Baltikian. Board members, do we have any questions for staff? Board Member Walsh.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my first question would be to try to understand exactly what is the extent of our authority here. Is this a true de novo hearing where we are looking at this as though it is for the first time, or are we limited in what we can view and decide upon based on the council's motion?
Well, from my understanding, the council's direction is pretty specific. Council's direction was to focus on the specific items in the council motion, in addition to the 12 conditions that were originally adopted by the Design Review Board.
I can help clarify a little bit. The council did not deny the project, but instead remanded it to the board to just verify that the conditions that the board imposed were successfully implemented. We spoke with the city manager today just to make sure that we at staff level understood this, and he specifically tells us that the board's duty tonight or purview tonight is to look specifically at the conditions and address those. If you have comments on the conditions, if you think another condition is required to better meet one of the conditions that were previously placed on the project, you can do that, but we can't step beyond those topics. Now, of course, I believe we'll hear from members of the public. We received a number of letters, and some of those raised some of the same issues that the board has considered before and that council also considered, but we can't step beyond what the city manager has given us based on the remand from council.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, this is essentially not a de novo hearing. This is really just a verification hearing, as it were.
Yeah, I don't want to speak legalese and say it's not a de novo hearing, but that's the direction from the city attorney, Bilia.
Yes, Board Member Welch, DRB board members, we have confirmed with Mike Garcia, the city attorney, that your purview would be the conditions set forth in the council motion. So you're more than welcome to take any and all testimony from the public. So we encourage any callers, or, you know, there've been a number of interested parties that have submitted letters. And so that will all be kept a matter of the public record. But your authority would be to determine whether or not the conditions set forth in the motion, so those would be the 5, and one of those being to ensure that the previous design review board conditions are addressed as well. So that would be your scope for this evening.
And then we also have additional information from the city arborist in case any questions raised by the public lead to questions from the board. We may have some other information about just pruning and drip lines and things like that that we can add to the discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Platt. Thank you, Ms. Semidaitis, Mr. Baktikian, for the clarifications. Now, board members, are you ready for us to have the applicant present? Okay. Who will be representing the applicant today? Is it Mr. Brisky?
That would be me.
Welcome, and just state your name for the record.
Oh, okay. Sean Brisky.
Good evening.
Hi, good evening. You know, I read through the letters that were recently received, and a lot of the comments were, you know, comments previously noted. You know, some of the things, most of the lots in the neighborhood are about 4,500 square foot. You know, so they're significantly smaller than what the standard is for the city of Glendale. You know, my lot is, I don't know, 6,100 square feet. So there's a bigger lot. The other thing is that the frontage, the typical lot is 44 feet, has 44 feet of frontage. And mine is twice that size. It has 88 linear feet of frontage. So, so some of the comments about the house being larger than other houses in the neighborhood, you know, it's rooted in larger lot, larger frontage. The other thing is oftentimes people, you know, they see what they want to see. The house that is located directly across from my property is a 4,000 square foot house. And, you know, my current house, which is in back of the property, is a little over 2,000 square feet. So not everything in the neighborhood is a small house. There's a number of very large houses in the neighborhood. And the average for my house is just below, it's at 1975. it's just below 2,000 square feet, which is about the neighborhood average. So in summary, and I say that in response to the most recent letters, which is to say, I do listen to what people say, but I think they're being subjective and they're looking at just what they want to see. You know, the other point I'd like to make is that this will be a high quality house. This is a house I'm going to live in. It's going to have wood floors, wood windows. It'll be very much a custom house. And it, you know, I mean, and the size of the house is rooted in my family. I have an extended family. My son was living with us up until very recently, due to the COVID thing. And we have a granddaughter, and we watch our granddaughter, you know, on the weekdays when my daughter works. The size of the house is appropriate to how we use it. Other than that, Chris Bogdikian did an excellent job of, you know, comparing what was originally designed and how it was modified, you know, based on the DRB's original comments, and, you know, with the council's concerns added to that. You know, I don't think I could add anything to what he reviewed. That's all I've got to say. Unless you have questions, specific questions for me. I did work closely with Kathleen Williams, the arborist, the Glendale City arborist. She helped me a great deal with the revised landscape plan. And I'll work with her. You know, there's some measures about hand digging as you get close to the oak tree. And, you know, I'll work with her. She can be on site as well as the arborist. So, you know, I consider the oak tree to be a huge asset to the property. And I have no doubt that I can completely and adequately protect the oak tree during construction.
Thank you, Mr. Brisky. Board members, do we have any questions for Mr. Brisky? Board member Walsh?
Yeah, a couple of questions. And I'm perhaps repeating something that I said at the original hearing, but I'm still trying to understand exactly where and how these materials meet the wood siding in the upper section and the stucco sections for the first story. How is that joint handled?
There'll be a plaster. So there's a metal J bead, and that will be the termination of the plaster. And then the wood siding will be applied vertically, and it'll abut the metal casing bead from the plaster.
And all the materials will be within the same plane, or will there be any
Correct.
offsets?
No, they're coplanar. The wood siding will be 3/4 of an inch thick, and the plaster is 7/8 of an inch thick. So they're essentially coplanar.
Mm-hmm. The second question relates to this screening that's you proposed on one side of that second story balcony, and staff is recommending a condition for the other side as well. The reason I call it out is because it doesn't seem to fit exactly with the design language that you're employing elsewhere, where you have these trellises. Especially, it seems like you've brought the green plaster forms, whether they're sort of the pilaster forms that look on the front, or the vertical element on the south elevation, and the wood treatment there. It just doesn't seem to mesh. So I was wondering if you had considered bringing more of that sort of that pilaster look up towards the trellises there to do the screening, as opposed to just sort of a tacked on wood screen?
Well, the wood, so the second story, not the full second story, but the upper part of the second story is wood, and it actually aligns. So the plaster part of the balcony is the guardrail, if you will. That was the original intent. And the guardrail happens to align with that joint that I described between the plaster and the wood. So it seemed to me only natural to use wood for the screen wall. The other thing is that I thought it tied in nicely with the wood trellis. It's kind of like you reach a datum point, and then everything above the datum point is wood, and then everything below is plaster. So that was the kind of thinking and the logic behind that.
Okay.
Any other questions by the board members for the applicant? Thank you. Ms. Simitides, do we have callers for this project? Okay.
Yes, we do. We have 3 callers at this moment. The first caller, Ingrid Wilcox.
Great, and I'd like to.
You're live on the air with the Design Review Board.
And if you would, Ms. Simitides, please keep a track of our 3-minute timer.
Of course.
Each speaker will have 3 minutes. So with that, we'll turn it over to the first speaker.
Yes. Ingrid Wilcox, you're live on the air with the Design Review Board.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairperson and members of the Design Review Board. My name is Ingrid Wilcox, and I reside at 1232 Vista Court, which is directly on the south side of the 1226 Vista Court lot, and I've lived here for almost 14 years. I'm also speaking on behalf of the Matosian family, who have resided at 1222 Vista Court for over 27 years. Their home is directly north of the 1226 Court lot. They're working the night shoot on a commercial and are unable to make a call to this meeting. I submitted a letter and many photographs to all of the members of this board via email, and I hope you had time to look at it. Both the Matosians and myself will lose a considerable amount of privacy if a project of this size is allowed to be built. As I stated in my letter, I have an open floor plan that consists of my living room, kitchen, and dining room, and my home is set back approximately 26 feet from the rear east-facing side of the proposed design. All the windows on the first floor of the project on that area, the balcony and the windows on the second floor of that east side will look directly into my home, my backyard, and gardens. The Matosians will experience the same with the north-facing windows, balcony, and the 2-story windows on the northeast corner, and the same east-facing balcony on the plans. It'll look into their home and will look directly into their balcony and backyard space 100%. Municipal Code 30.47.040 addresses this, and Mayor Devine addressed this clearly during our appeal. Quote, "I want to see no privacy issues." Staff omitted that language and has only made reference to the balcony to the privacy issue. The sight lines on the plans reflect a 90-degree zone of sight. This is really unrealistic and does not in any way demonstrate the reality of the views. The potential violation of privacy is really pivotal here. We all purchased homes that we care deeply about, and the way I lead my life will be completely disrupted. Let's see. I also want to express my concern for the protected coastline oak tree on the lot. It was recently measured to 4.5-foot height and found to have a diameter of almost 41 inches. The staff report says the diameter is 32, and the indigenous tree report was done in 2019, almost 2.5 years ago. The municipal code about indigenous trees discusses that 12 inches below the drip line is a protected zone, and the 2019 indigenous tree report reports that the house will extend 3 feet into the drip line, making the encroachment at least 4 feet. This tree is going to get larger, so this presents a major future problem. I'm going to skip over a couple of things here. I also want to be noted that the applicant created 2 subdivisions in 2015. There's a second parcel on the Reynolds Drive side of the original property. The size and shape of these lots is self-imposed, and any restrictions that occur of their own design. The applicant is clearly here as a developer, and any precedent set here, code violations and the like, are likely to be repeated in the second subdivision. And this project is too large for the buildable space. The plans are in violation of multiple municipal codes and
3
conditions.
minutes.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for me? Do I get a couple extra minutes because I'm speaking on behalf of the neighbors on the other side? I can be done in about 30 seconds.
Actually,
No, I'd like to clarify something. You stated you're speaking for the neighbors on the northern side, but we received an email today that staff forwarded to us, date stamped January 26, from Mr. Matosian, withdrawing his previous comments and his previous opposition. And so I just wanted to put that on the record, and we do have your presentation as well. Staff forwarded that. Mr. Baltigian, and has been very thorough with sharing all information back and forth. But you could have 15 seconds to wrap up your thoughts.
Okay, I also wanted to point out that, you know, there's 3 new members on the current design review board, and there's not been any story polls made available for them to see the actual massiveness and, you know, how the orientation of the proposed building is going to really affect the lot and the surrounding area and the tree. And I think that's a disadvantage.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Imatitis, who is our next speaker?
Hello, it's me.
Yes, go ahead. State your name for the record, sir.
Okay, my name is Henry Hernandez. I'm sorry?
Good evening.
Good evening, sir. Okay, I live next door to the proposal project. And I, besides having all the issues that Mrs. Ingrid mentioned already, I have a question to the person who wants to build the house. And my question is that, okay, first of all, I wanted to tell you that I live in that property since 1984. And I moved to another property around the corner 20 years ago. And my daughter and my sister-in-law, they're still living in 1221 Reynolds Drive. My question to this person is that how he ran the piping for the electricity almost 3 or 4 years ago, I believe, without me knowing and without, I guess, having any permission to do it. And the problem is that since that he did that without the plans or without anything, they open a trench in front of my property to run the piping all the way to the post, and they broke the sewer line in my property. And since that time, I've been having problems with the sewer line. Every 6 months, I need to call the plumber because they broke the pipe, and they just patch it, and they put cement in, in the middle of the street, and supposedly they fix it. And I want to know who can fix that problem for me. It's either the city or the person who's trying to build the house, because I having that problem, and since the pandemic, nobody listened to me. And I even went when they tried to put the cement to cover the big hole, and they just didn't listen to me. We sent pictures to the city, and city didn't do anything. And I'm upset because I'm a Spanish speaking person, and nobody listened to me. And that's my question to this person.
The work for the underground electrical.
Sir, if I may, I'd like to thank the speaker for posting the question. But Mr. Brisky, if you would just hold your comments, you're going to have a rebuttal period at the end. So just jot down your thoughts. Sir, what we'll do is staff is going to follow up with you, and we'll tell you the exact person at Public Works Engineering that you could contact that will give you additional information, etc. Also, at the end of this presentation, you'll hear from the applicant at least his point of view as to the sequence of events. But hang in there, and what we're going to do is someone will get your number, and we'll put you in touch with the right individuals to try to answer your questions. Okay?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Zimatidis, if you would just follow up with that individual, and somehow by getting their contact information, we could move on to the next speaker.
Thank you. Yes. Rondi Warner, you're live on the air with the Design Review Board.
Yes, hello. I'm Rondi Warner, Vice President of the Adams Hill Neighborhood Association and Vice President of the Glendale Homeowners Coordinating Council. We appreciate that the revised design addresses some of the conditions applied by DRB, Planning Commission, and City Council, but there are still some conditions that we don't feel have been adequately addressed. For example, the second floor above the garage does not appear to be sufficiently stepped back to provide what Council described as a meaningful reduction of the front elevation massing. The square footage of the house didn't change, and yet the garage increased in size by 35 square feet. So that suggests that the applicant pushed out the garage by 3 feet towards the street instead of stepping back the upper floor. Wouldn't the square footage have decreased if it was actually pushed back? Or maybe that's just an error. Maybe they just didn't revise the square footage. So I'd like some clarification on that. And so it also doesn't seem that the mass and scale issue has been fully addressed as well. And the applicant provided a line of sight map, which is great, but it didn't indicate the full range of view from those windows. And it also did not include the view from the floor to ceiling window wall of the living room, where I would think there would be substantial privacy impacts. So that condition has not been met. And DRB condition number 5 had required that the locations of the downspouts and gutters be shown, but only the exposed upper floor is shown and not the far more important locations where the downspouts drain to the exterior. And it only states all drainage from lower roof is inside wall. Well, it has to exit the building somehow, and we'd like to know where that is, given that there's a protected tree on the property. The drainage is very important. So we don't feel that the DRB condition was totally met. So hopefully that can be clarified today. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. And any more callers? No?
No, we do not have any more callers. No more.
Okay. With that, we're going to go back to the applicant, Mr. Brisky. Mr. Brisky, this is your rebuttal opportunity. Ms. Zimatidis, how much time does Mr. Brisky have? 3 minutes. And if you would, focus in on the caller's comments. There was the damage of sewer issue. And then, of course, also the other 2 callers with the specific questions, if you would. Thank you, Mr. Brisky. You're on mute. If you would restart the time, Ms. Zimatidis. Go ahead, Mr. Brisky.
Okay, so the underground electric, all of that work was done by Glendale DWP or Glendale Water and Power. You know, I didn't really have any involvement. It was all permitted, and you know, so I honestly I don't know anything about what may have happened to his sewer. Not sure. What were some of the other questions?
It's hard for us to reiterate, but there were side of view questions that had come up for privacy from the owner to the south. And that was kind of the focus point of a lot of her comments and presentation. And
So
the recent caller that just called in was wanting further clarification that the setback in the garage occurred along with some of the other conditions such as rerouting of downspouts, etc. So if you would kind of
okay. Well, the downspouts, so from the upper, they are carried within the wall. The exact location of where it comes out, there's a storm drain easement. So there's one corner of the property that that has a catch basin, and then it actually drains down to Reynolds. So I haven't decided yet, but it's conceivable that the storm drain pipe could run under the house and carry it to the corner where the catch basin is. Or another option would be to kind of create a bioswale and hold the water. This is what's commonly required now, to hold, so it recharges the groundwater. So I'm more inclined to do the bioswale solution. And then my wife is saying the garage, I guess there was a question about the setback on the garage. 3 foot is a pretty good setback. I'm not sure what dimension they had in mind. Oh, did I make the garage larger? I did. Well, that's where I put the mechanical equipment. So it's not part of the garage. That's where the air conditioning is. The air conditioning compressors. What else were the? The privacy. I did provide line of sight drawings. That show the, where the view is from each window. The first floor windows, there's already a large hedge around much of this would be the eastern part of the property. I have a line of sight drawing. So, and it doesn't look into people's backyards and it doesn't look into people's windows. I deleted Miss Wilcox. Originally there were 2 windows. I deleted one of the windows that was on that would have been the southern elevation. So some of these things have been addressed previously. And generally, overall, the backside of my house faces east. To look into her windows or anyone else's windows, I would have to look in a different direction. I would be looking south. So to hear her describe it, it sounds like my windows face east and her windows are in the easterly direction. Oh, time? Okay, that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Brisky. Board members, do we have questions for Mr. Brisky? Nope. So with that, we'll go ahead and close the public portion. But hang in there, Mr. Brisky. We may have some additional questions for you. Also, that one gentleman that called about the sewer, I think staff is going to get in touch with that person at some point this evening. So with that, Mr. Welch, would you like to start us off on this project?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so just to start off, it's clear that we have a much more limited scope of what we're here to review and adjudicate upon. So I will focus mostly on those things and any deviations that have occurred in the plans since the first time that we reviewed the case. I do believe that the applicant has addressed many, if not even most, of the conditions. The color scheme is definitely more muted. I think it is more appropriately done. I think that the setback on the second story above the garage. And I looked at this to double check. The face of the garage is actually in the same location. The driveway setback is the same as it was before. So I think that he did actually set back the second story portion by that 3 feet. I think he just added 3 feet to the back side of the garage for the mechanical equipment and trash. So that's why he's able to have the second story pushed back that 3 feet. Is 3 feet sufficient? I mean, I think I would have liked to have seen more. I think that there was opportunity to do more, but you know, it is something, and I think that the colored deviations between the first floor and the second floor, you know, especially using a darker wood staining on the siding for the second floor will help visually to set that back. So I think that it's probably sufficient, although I would have, if you'd asked me before, I would have said a little bit more. Lighting plan on the exterior, I you know, can appreciate that it was now included, that it wasn't before. I note that there are 2 lights, exterior lights positioned on the south side, which does face the property immediately adjacent. It makes no sense to me why they would be there. I think that we should remove those lights, particularly one of them, the one on the far right-hand side, as you're looking at page A2, the elevations, the south elevation. The one on the right-hand side, it would face directly into the neighbor's window. So I don't think that that's an appropriate location. I think both of the lights on that side of the house should be removed. I think that beyond that, you know, I really don't have much more to add. I think that it is an interesting design. It's eclectic. I made a comment earlier to the applicant about the that wood screening on the that would be the east elevation. I'm not sure I'm fully convinced by what he said, because if I look at the front elevation right above the front door, I see the green plaster elevating all the way up into the second story, topped by trellises. If I look at the south elevation, I see the green mass behind which is a closet rising up into the wood, topped by trellis. So I think that, you know, from a consistency standpoint, you could easily do the same on that east elevation and have it be, you know, consistent throughout the entire design. And I think that would make it work. But, you know, I'll leave it to my fellow board members whether they find it incongruous the same as I do, whether they agree with that or not. Beyond that, I think that, you know, Mr. Bagdikian did a good job recapping the case, you know, showing all the conditions that were applied by us, applied by City Council, and how that the applicant largely has met them. I don't think that we have any real reasonable grounds to say that they have not. So I think that that's what my perspective on the matter is. So I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Board Welsh. Board Member Chigayan.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the presentation, Mr. Vadikian, for doing a nice comparison between what was previously approved and what the current design is, especially for, I think I'm the only board member that was not a part of the original decision making. So with that said, I also appreciate or thank you for clarifying what is in our purview. I appreciate the neighbors that were calling and giving their opinion of what they don't appreciate about the project. But unfortunately, as it was stated in the meeting, we are limited in what we can discuss. So in looking at the conditions, from both city council motion and from the original conditions of DRB. I too believe that most, if not all, have been addressed. I am in agreement with Board Member Welsh, where the one I was sort of on the fence on is whether or not the second story above the garage was step back enough. I wasn't part of the original decision making, so I'm not entirely sure what the board had in mind when that was given as a condition at the time. But if staff believes that it meets the requirement, I'd like to support and believe that it should be sufficient for myself as well. I agree that the color palette is definitely much nicer, and I hope that even Mr. Brisky would agree now, seeing it in comparison with what was proposed originally. Let's see. One comment I would make is the line of sight, visual that was provided. I typically would have loved to see either a section or elevation, showing a person, their eyesight, and how it relates to the home surrounding, in particular this one at the rear and the one at the north. Because sometimes a plan is, it's deceiving. A house can be higher, lower, and I did drive past the property. As one of the callers stated, there are no story poles today for me to have seen, but I appreciate the photos that were provided previously. But again, it's out of my purview to make any further comments. I am in agreement with Mr. Welsh with his suggestions about the rear balcony. I think that's the second condition that really isn't, I don't believe, fully met. And Mr. Badikian proposed adding additional screening, which I believe will help. And I'm in favor of Mr. Welsh's recommendation to, it just seems like it wasn't thought through. It was just sort of plopped on in a nutshell. So I would support that as well if we want to change that, and then the lighting as well, Mr. Welsh. That concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Chagayan. I wholeheartedly agree with my board members on all thoughts. I don't want to reiterate all the points, but I do agree with everything that's been said. My only thought would be, it just seems as though we're screening the southern portion and the northern portion of this second story balcony. And should that balcony even be there? Yeah, at the end of the day, we have a very concerned neighbor to the south that is worrying about privacy for all the right reasons. And we have this unusual lot that just happens to be wide and not as deep, with a massive oak tree in the middle. And so the applicant has been trying for a very long time to build this house. It is not a big house. It's less than 2,000 square feet as proposed. But I do believe when we go through a process like this, compromises need to be made. And it just seems as though if we're swinging the south side and the north side and the top, what is really the intent of that balcony? So I would, take it a step further and say, there is quite a bit of concern about privacy and how important is that balcony. And we've done this in many, many other cases in the back and previously where there was a second story balcony where we, for whatever reason, thought it was inappropriate. And I would say this is one. In regards to the changes that have been imposed, I do believe they were all for the positive. I do think 3 feet is adequate as far as a setback for the second story. At times we force an applicant 1.6 2 feet. In this case, it's 3 feet. I'm looking at the previous drawing and the new drawings, and they are both set back 25 feet. to the face of the garage, and the rear dimension has been reduced by 3 feet in the new plans. So if I'm looking on sheet A1, there's a clear difference of 3 feet between the old and the new with the rear setback. And so it has been pushed back. Now, overall, I think the design is a bit different than the overall language of that neighborhood. But I've always gotten the feeling from the applicant that there's going to be a level of quality to the design and a level of thought process that will go into the design that I'm comforted by. Graphics have always been an issue with this case as far as the presentation of the material, but the substance and the responses have always kind of assured us that there is someone behind the wheel looking out. And so I do think it's time to move this project along. It's been here for a long time, but I do think compromises should be made. And I would suggest the condition to remove that balcony, just so we're not forcing a round peg into a square hole. Board members, are there any concluding thoughts?
I mean, I hadn't really thought to actually talk about removing the balcony, but you know, I tend to agree. I think we're trying very hard to deal with privacy issues, and you know, the result, you know, both the wood screening, you know, which I agree with Board Member Chagai, and it seemed tacked on to me, which is why I was focusing on it, I guess. And my attempt, you know, it's like, okay, maybe we're just trying to stick a finger in the dike, and what we should really do is address it full on, and you know, so I think I would agree with that.
Mr. Platt and Mr. Belpigian, as a complicated case like this that's gone back and forth, are there any clarifications that you need from us at this point in time?
If two of the board members said something along the lines of most, if not all, of the conditions have been met, I think we need some certainty that the board is, or at least the majority of the board, would agree that the conditions, with any new conditions added at tonight's hearing, leads to the conclusion that all of the conditions have been met for the project, rather than leaving it a little. I think that's better for the public and better for the project, if you agree. There are several new conditions that I'll just read back real quickly. Remove the 2 lights on the south facade to avoid overspill toward the neighbor. We're going to delete the balcony. And I had some other notes about the screening at the balcony, but those don't count anymore. So I think that's it, unless I'm missing something.
Yeah,
if in any motion, that would be the time to express that the board feels that the conditions have been met, if that's the case.
Yes, I think I'd like to, I guess, go on record just to say that in my mind, the 2 that were sort of questionable for me were the privacy issue with the balcony and then the step back over the garage. But after hearing Mr. Simonian and then Mr. Welch's agreement of, you know, deleting that balcony, I think is a nice compromise. And then Mr. Simonian agreed that the 3 feet, I guess, was sufficient for him, although that one seemed a little, you guys were not in full agreement. So I'll leave it up to my fellow board members. But otherwise, I do agree that all the conditions were met.
Oh, and I'm flexible, Board Member Welch. If you feel strongly about adding additional articulation with that 2nd story setback, I will go along with it. And my comment was that has it been met? And has it been depicted to us that it's been met? And the answer is yes. Will the board members like more? I'm going to leave that up to the person that puts up the motion.
If I may add another clarification, may I, Mr. Chair?
Absolutely. Go ahead, Mr. Rodriguez.
Regarding the removal of the balcony, would the board be okay replacing the balcony with the canopy structure similar to the two ends of the building? With the way that those canopies on both ends of the building were modified, they were lower so that they wouldn't be usable as a balcony from the second level. So something similar would provide a cover over the door on the ground level, and it would add a design element similar to the sides of the building without being eventually used as a balcony. Just cover.
Yes, I think, Mr. Rodriguez, that makes sense. Yes, I agree.
Okay.
I think that it would work with the design too, because you need that little pop of color in that location. So I think it is correct.
So we can say remove the balcony and replace it with a canopy over the first floor.
Yeah, with parapets similar to what was stipulated for the other similar locations around the periphery of the property, the house.
Because the covered porch at the first level is already there, so we'll just drop the parapet to a non-usable level. Would, while we're fine-tuning this, there were windows and a door proposed. Should we leave the two windows in that location and just eliminate the door, get rid of the balcony and lower the parapet?
It's interesting, Mr. Platt, as I was about to speak, you said it, I was looking at the window schedule. Window number 7 above is a 2 foot, I think it was a 2 foot wide window. And I think we should make all three a window, narrow window like that, as indicated. So they will all be number 7 windows, which is 24 inches wide, and with the same sill height, and so it wouldn't be used as a swing door in the future.
Would, if I was to put a fixed piece of glass, I mean, because there is a nice view from that area, so the operable windows would be 2 foot wide, but there might be a 4 foot fixed pane of glass to take advantage of the view.
You jumped in. We usually don't have a lot of communication back and forth, but here we are. You have said something, and to board members, are there any thoughts on that? I have a thought on that, but are there any thoughts on that?
I mean, he's right. It does have a nice view from there, but he also has a window. It looks like on the north side of that bedroom that overlooks the living room, which would easily be able to take in the view as well from the second story windows above the living room. So I think they'll be getting the benefit of view from that perspective. But I'm not completely opposed to the notion of having some larger element of window to be able to take in the view.
Another option would be to just have a trellis covering the lower dining area. So there would not be any kind of possibility of using it as a balcony. It would just be a trellis. And then I would think I could, have a bigger opening up there where the view is.
I think that's a good compromise. You've eliminated the flat balcony, thereby reducing any thoughts of it being used as a balcony in the future, and you're going to have an open trellis and in which case then if you decide to go with a wider window, which sounds like that's the way you're leaning, and I suggest we prescribe a very specific thought here just so there's no confusion. You have window symbols number 7, which are 24 inches wide by 48. And then right now you have a door in the middle, which is B, which is 36 inches wide. Is your idea to put a 36-inch wide window in the middle, or you said 4-foot plane, which doesn't work with the geometry?
What I'd like to do actually is to have like a sliding door, but with a guardrail that's, the guardrail would be flush with the outside wall, but then you still get the, the big view.
No. I think the idea is not to have floor to ceiling opening, not to have a sliding door. The idea is to eliminate the balcony, which is the way we're going. And so I'd like to close the public portion at this point. I think we've gotten feedback. I would suggest board members that we could have a trellis and keep 3 24-inch wide by 48-inch high windows fixed. And well, no, one of them would have to be operable.
Yeah, one of them would have to be operable.
Right. And I believe you can't have a 24-inch because you got to have minimum, I think, 26 inches to have, might be a little more too. So one of them may be a casement anyways. So
it needs to meet the fire department exit requirements. So when the window is in the open position, it has to have 20 inches of width. Or it might be a little more. I'm not.
I think it's a little more.
If you said mid,
sir, at this point, I'm going to respectfully ask that you don't interject for the rest of our presentation. I don't want to meet you.
Okay, sorry.
That's all right. We understand you've been at this for a while. Mr. Platt, go ahead.
I can throw out, looking at sheet A2, where we're looking at this east elevation, if you look at the window and door configuration below at the first level, it's a little wider because there are 2 slider windows plus a door. I think if the goal is to have 3 equally sized windows, we could certainly work with building and safety to make sure that whatever the dimension of each of those windows is would meet egress. And then Mr. Brisky could choose whether to have 3 operable windows or a fixed window in the center, perhaps. And then we would achieve the board's goal of a balanced composition. Or if you wanted to have narrower windows on the side that meet number 7, and then a larger window in the center that meets whatever the minimum egress width would be, we could do that also.
I think it's fine for us to ask the applicant to work with staff to work out a window plan here. I think it's pretty clear that we don't want, a balcony. We don't want a French balcony. We don't want, big sections of operable glass. I think we want, something that works with the design, something that can be in keeping with it. And that, staff can work with the applicant to come up with a scheme for the windows for that master bedroom that is appropriate.
Okay. So could someone, are we ready to make a motion?
Yeah, look, Mr. Chair, if I may, I've been looking at the floor plans for this second floor, and I don't see how it's going to be easy to push the setback further. The size of these bedrooms above the garage are already, quite moderate. I don't see that we could really squeeze much more. So I'll call myself reasonably satisfied with the 3-foot setback.
Okay. Yeah, they're about 10'6" at most clear each.
Yeah.
We'd also start running into issues with the building volumes shifting kind of awkwardly, perhaps. So.
Mm-hmm.
Throughout this process, this house has really been pushed and pulled from all angles, right? You have this wide lot, not as deep. You have an oak tree. It's modest size, and everything's at a minimum. And I want the public to really understand that, you have these bedrooms that are 10'6". You have extremely narrow stairs going up to the second floor, like a 3-foot stair going up. Your corridors are only 3 foot wide, or maybe 3'2". The office is maybe 8'9" deep. on the second floor, as far as a clear dimension, it is tight. It has been just compacted to try to accommodate everyone's requests and thoughts. And, you know, at this point, I think we have done everything we can do to eliminate privacy issues. And so I just wanted to share that with you. Now, Board Member Walsh or Board Member Chagayan, are we ready for a motion?
I think so. I guess I would move to approve the project with the stated conditions as we, I guess, edited, if you will, with the balcony and the lights and etc.
And the windows, etc.
Yes.
Okay.
And let me
I'll
clarify,
second that.
in addition to the staff recommended conditions and as modified by the discussion now.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so we have a motion by Board Member Chagayan. And do we have a second?
Yes, second.
Can I just ask, did that motion clearly state that the board believes that the conditions remanded to it by council have been met?
Yes, Mr. Platt,
Yes.
for clarity's sake, would you like to go over the conditions just to make sure you're crystal clear on everything and add whatever you need at this point for the record?
I don't mind. This is a strange situation for the board.
It's probably a good use of a few minutes. Yes, please.
Condition, it's not really a condition. I don't know how to put this, and maybe Vilya has an idea, but a statement from the board expressing its belief that all of the conditions that were remanded to it by council for reconsideration have been met, except for those modified. And the only modification would be the removal of the balcony, the replacement with a trellis, and 3 windows at the second floor. And then there's the additional condition about the lights at the south facade.
You said it perfectly, Jay, so thank you.
That covers it?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so are we ready for a roll call?
No. Yes, and then I wanted to also make sure that staff follows up with that one gentleman that called in about the sewer matter also.
Yeah, we'll take care of that.
Thank you.
So roll call. Board Member Chagayan,
Yes.
Board Member Welch,
Yes.
and Chairman Simonian.
Yes.
Motion carries 3-0.
Thank you, Board Member Chagayan, for joining us. I know you were not feeling well. Thank you for saving the hearing and providing us with a quorum. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Yeah, and I wish everyone, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Good evening, everyone.
Good night.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Good night.
Right.